It was September 5th, 2022, when wildlife photographer Sergei Ivanov ventured into the rugged terrain of Kamchatka, Russia. Sergei, a renowned photographer in his early 40s, had a passion for capturing the beauty of wildlife in their natural habitats. Born and raised in the outskirts of Moscow, Sergei developed a love for nature early on, spending his childhood exploring forests and observing animals. This passion led him to pursue a career in wildlife photography, where he quickly gained recognition for his stunning images of rare and endangered species. Sergei's work took him to some of the most remote and wild places on Earth, from the African savannas to the icy landscapes of Antarctica. His dedication to capturing the perfect shot often required him to spend weeks in harsh conditions, waiting patiently for the right moment. His photographs not only showcased the beauty of the natural world, but also raised awareness about conservation efforts. For this particular expedition, Sergei was in Kamchatka, a peninsula in the Russian Far East known for its volcanic landscapes and abundant wildlife. His goal was to photograph the elusive Kamchatka brown bear, one of the largest bear species in the world. The bears are known to frequent rivers during salmon season, making this the perfect time for Sergei to capture them in action. He set up camp near a river that was a popular feeding ground for the bears, hoping to photograph them as they caught fish. The location Sergei chose was remote and rugged, surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains. The area was teeming with wildlife, and Sergei was excited about the potential shots he could capture. He carefully set up his equipment, positioning his camera and tripod at a spot with a clear view of the river. He also set up his tent a short distance away, ensuring he had a place to rest and review his photos. The day was clear and crisp, the river's water glistening under the sun. Sergei spent hours focused on his camera, capturing the bears as they fished for salmon. The bears moved with a grace that belied their size, and Sergei marveled at their strength and agility. He was so engrossed in his work that he failed to notice a massive bear silently approaching from behind. By the time Sergei sensed the danger, it was too late. The bear, perhaps feeling threatened or curious, lunged at him. Sergei tried to scramble away, but the bear was too fast. It swiped at his leg, causing severe injuries. Pain shot through Sergei as he struggled to fend off the bear. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, he grabbed his tripod and used it to ward off the bear. The bear's assault was relentless, but Sergei's determination kept him fighting. He managed to crawl toward his tent, leaving a trail of blood behind. His mind raced with fear and desperation, knowing that he needed help fast. As he reached the tent, he grabbed his emergency beacon and set it off, hoping it would alert rescuers to his location. The bear, momentarily distracted by the noise and movement, backed off. Sergei, exhausted and in pain, collapsed inside the tent. The moments that followed were a blur as he waited, hoping that help would arrive before it was too late. His camera, still running, captured the harrowing moments of the encounter, documenting his struggle and the bear's attack. Inside the tent, Sergei Ivanov lay in pain, bleeding from the deep wounds on his leg. The bear had retreated, but the danger was far from over. Sergei's emergency beacon was activated, sending out a distress signal. He knew that the signal would reach the rescue team at the nearby research station, but he wasn't sure how long it would take for help to arrive. The area around the Kamchatka Peninsula is known for its rugged and remote terrain, making it challenging for rescue teams to reach quickly. Sergei tried to stay awake, focusing on his breathing and trying to calm his mind. The pain was intense, and the cold was beginning to set in. He wrapped himself in a sleeping bag, hoping to keep warm and prevent shock. As the minutes passed, Sergei's thoughts turned to his family and friends. He wondered if he would make it out of this ordeal and if anyone would find him in time. The fear of not surviving weighed heavily on his mind, but he tried to stay positive, knowing that his distress signal had been sent. The sound of a helicopter in the distance brought a glimmer of hope. The rescue team was on its way, navigating the challenging landscape of Kamchatka. The helicopter landed nearby, and the rescue team quickly assessed Sergei's condition. They provided first aid, stopping the bleeding and stabilizing him for transport. The team worked quickly, knowing that time was of the essence. Sergei was airlifted to a hospital in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, the largest city on the Kamchatka Peninsula. There, he received immediate medical attention for his injuries. The doctors treated the deep lacerations on his leg and monitored him for signs of infection. Sergei was grateful to be alive, though the experience had left him shaken. The photographs and videos captured during the attack provided a chilling account of the encounter. The footage showed the bear approaching and the desperate moments as Sergei tried to defend himself. These images served as a powerful reminder of the dangers wildlife photographers and researchers face in the field. As Sergei recovered, the story of his encounter with the Kamchatka brown bear spread, highlighting the need for caution and preparedness in remote wilderness areas. The incident underscored the importance of safety protocols and emergency preparedness when working in such unpredictable environments. Sergei's experience left a lasting impact on him, deepening his respect for the wild animals he had dedicated his life to photography. The encounter was a reminder of the power and unpredictability of nature, and the thin line between observer and participant in the wild. Sergei knew he would return to the field, but with a renewed awareness of the risks and a commitment to safety.
Canadian wilderness, with its towering pines, jagged ridgelines, and still lakes, felt like a different world to those accustomed to urban life. A group of corporate executives seeking a challenging week of wilderness survival training arrived in this remote expanse, unaware of how intense their experience would become. Guided by 3 instructors, Gunnar Alaric, a stern, seasoned guide, Licky Borchard, an expert in foraging and shelter building, and Abram Martel, a skilled tracker, the executives embarked on a team-building adventure. They were equipped with basic survival skills but were unprepared for the rawness of their environment. The first 2 days were productive. Gunnar taught navigation using stars and a compass, Licky demonstrated shelter construction with deadfall and branches, and Abram led tracking exercises. The executives, though tired and sore, were proud of their progress. However, on the 3rd night, things began to unravel. After a strenuous day, the group settled near their campsite for dinner. Despite warnings, some food scraps were left out, the scent of roasted meat lingering in the air. Exhaustion and a sense of accomplishment led to complacency. As the fire died and the group retired to their shelters, a calm wind rustled through the forest. The night was clear and peaceful, but Abram, the experienced tracker, felt an uneasy sense of familiarity with the distant rustle. This sound suggested something significant was moving through the forest. Far from the camp, a grizzly bear prowled. Its powerful nose detected the lingering scent of food, drawing it closer to the campsite. The bear, solitary and hungry, moved with deliberate steps through the trees, its massive form casting an ominous shadow as it approached. The bear's approach was slow but inevitable. In the vastness of the wilderness, predators like the grizzly had long learned patience and caution. It circled the camp from a distance, analyzing the scene with primal intelligence. The smell of meat mixed with the human scent had brought it here, and its hunger overcome any fear it might have harbored. It continued its slow, deliberate approach. Within the camp, everything was still. The fire had long died out, and the stars above provided the only light. A faint breeze stirred the tree branches. The instructors and executives lay inside their shelters, oblivious to the approaching danger. The bear moved with a quietness that belied its immense size. It sniffed at the air, edging closer to the remnants of the evening's dinner. The improperly stored food, still faintly warm from the fire, was the perfect bait. Without warning, the bear ransacked the area, upending pots, pans, and bags in search of nourishment. The sound was sudden and violent, a crash of metal and fabric. Gunnar was the first to awaken. His instincts kicked in before his mind could fully process the scene. The smell, the sound. He knew exactly what was happening. His heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed for the bear spray that was always close at hand, but the bear was quicker than anyone could have anticipated. It had found food, and its hunger made it bold. The camp exploded into chaos. As the bear tore through the campsite, it came upon the first unlucky participant. A man named Tobin Winslow, one of the younger executives, had pitched his shelter too close to where the food had been left. In a matter of moments, the bear had him pinned beneath its weight, its jaws sinking into his leg with terrifying force. His screams pierced the night, waking the others with a jolt of terror. There was no mistaking the sound. They were under attack. The executives, once confident in their newly acquired skills, were now paralyzed by fear. The bear's immense size and ferocity shattered any illusions they had of controlling their environment. In the dim light, they could see the massive silhouette of the bear, its eyes glowing with a predatory gleam, its fur bristling as it ransacked the area. Tobin's body was flailing, blood pooling beneath him as the bear thrashed him around like a rag doll. Instructors Gunnar, Licky, and Abram sprang into action, their training kicking in as the situation escalated. The bear spray, their last defense, was quickly deployed. Gunnar tried to approach Tobin, but the grizzly's attention shifted to Astrid Forrester, who had made the fatal error of running. In the chaos, Astrid fled toward the trees, but the bear, reacting to the movement, charged after her with terrifying speed. It knocked her to the ground with a brutal swipe, sending her sprawling. The bear loomed over her, jaws dripping, ready to strike again. The scene was chaotic. Gunner's hand trembled as he discharged a cloud of bear spray, the pungent mist forcing the grizzly to recoil momentarily, its eyes watering. Yet the spray wasn't enough to fully drive the bear away. With the bear dazed but still present, Gunner and Abram dragged Tobin, who lay bleeding and unconscious, away from immediate danger. Lick hurried to assess Astrid's injuries. She lay still, likely suffering from broken bones. The remaining participants huddled together and were gripped by shock. Their perception of the wilderness was now a harsh reality of survival. The bear, still nearby and watching warily, had retreated but not disappeared. The instructors faced a critical choice: stay and fortify the camp, risking another attack, or abandon it and seek safety, leaving behind their injured companions. As dawn broke, the site of the bear's attack was stark. The campsite was a mess of scattered pots, torn fabric, and blood-stained ground. Tobin lay on a makeshift stretcher, pale and sweating, his leg severely wounded and him in shock. Astrid, with a broken arm and multiple bruises, was immobile and groaning faintly. The group, though physically unharmed, moved like ghosts through the wreckage, their initial sense of adventure replaced by the grim reality of survival. They now faced a stark choice: confront nature's indifference or become another statistic in the relentless Canadian wilderness.
It was August 10th, 2021, in the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard, Norway, where Dr. Ingrid Lund, a dedicated biologist, was conducting important climate change research. Dr. Lund, a specialist in polar ecosystems, had been studying the effects of rising temperatures on the Arctic environment for over a decade. Her work often took her to remote and challenging locations where she collected data on ice melt, animal populations, and changes in the ecosystem. Ingrid's passion for the Arctic began during her college years when she first visited the region. The stark beauty of the icy landscapes and the unique wildlife captivated her. Over the years, she became an expert in her field, known for her meticulous research and dedication. Her studies contributed valuable insights into the effects of climate change, helping scientists and policymakers understand the urgent need for action. On August 10th, Ingrid was on a routine data collection trip near the edge of a glacier. She was gathering samples of ice and recording observations about the local wildlife. The day was cold and clear, typical for the region, with the vast white landscape stretching out as far as the eye could see. Ingrid was aware of the dangers posed by the harsh environment and the wildlife, particularly polar bears, which were common in the area. Polar bears are the top predators in the Arctic and can be dangerous if they feel threatened or are hungry. Dr. Lund always took precautions to avoid any encounters, carrying a flare gun and keeping her snowmobile ready for a quick escape. She was also trained in emergency protocols, which included recognizing the signs of bear activity and knowing how to respond in case of an encounter. While Ingrid was busy with her work, she noticed signs of a nearby polar bear, a distant figure moving slowly across the ice. Polar bears often roam vast distances in search of food, and Ingrid knew that any encounter with one could be dangerous. She stayed calm and continued her work, keeping an eye on the bear's movements. As the bear came closer, Ingrid realized it was a large, healthy adult. Despite her experience, a sense of unease washed over her. She knew that polar bears could be unpredictable, especially in an environment where food sources were becoming scarce due to melting ice. The bear seemed to notice her and changed its direction, heading straight toward her. Ingrid quickly decided to leave the area and started towards her snowmobile. As she reached it, she noticed the bear was closing in fast. She hurriedly tried to start the snowmobile, but to her dismay, it failed to start. Panic began to set in as the bear came even closer. The animal's size and speed were intimidating, and Ingrid knew she had only seconds to act. With no other options, Ingrid grabbed her flare gun. She fired a flare directly in front of the bear, hoping to startle it. The bright light and noise momentarily blinded the bear, causing it to stop and retreat slightly. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ingrid quickly gathered her equipment and retreated to her camp, her heart pounding with fear and adrenaline. The encounter had been a stark reminder of the dangers present in such a remote and unforgiving environment. After retreating to her camp, Dr. Ingrid Lund quickly secured the area, ensuring all equipment was safe and no food was left accessible. The camp was set up near the Longyearbyen Research Station, one of the northernmost settlements in the world where she could access communication tools and resources. The camp was equipped with a protective fence designed to deter wildlife, especially polar bears, from wandering too close. Ingrid's heart was still racing from the encounter. but she knew she needed to stay calm and assess her situation. She checked her minor injuries, finding only a few scrapes from the frantic retreat. The bear had not followed her to the camp, likely deterred by the flare and the noise. Ingrid took a moment to catch her breath and reflect on the close call. Her first step was to report the incident to the research station. She used the camp's radio to contact the station, explaining what had happened and describing the bear's behavior. The team at Longyearbyen responded promptly, advising Ingrid to remain vigilant and ready to evacuate if necessary. They also informed the local authorities, who monitor wildlife interactions closely, ensuring both human safety and the well-being of the animals. As she waited for further instructions, Ingrid thought about the risks researchers face in such remote areas. The Arctic is not only a harsh and challenging environment, but also a habitat for some of the world's most formidable predators. The incident highlighted the importance of strict safety protocols and constant awareness. Even with years of experience and preparation, the unpredictable nature of wildlife posed significant dangers. The encounter also underscored the impact of climate change on the region. As ice melts and the Arctic environment changes, polar bears are forced to travel farther for food, leading to more frequent interactions with humans. Ingrid's research was crucial in understanding these changes and advocating for conservation efforts. The data she collected would help in developing strategies to protect both the animals and the people working in these areas. Later that day, a team from the research station arrived to check on Ingrid and ensure her safety. They reinforced the camp's perimeter and provided additional supplies, including another flare gun and medical supplies. They commended her quick thinking and calm response, which had prevented a potentially tragic situation. Ingrid remained at the camp for the rest of her assignment, taking extra precautions and staying in close contact with the research station. The experience left a lasting impression on her, reinforcing her commitment to studying the Arctic and raising awareness about the challenges faced by both the environment and its inhabitants. Her work continued to play a vital role in highlighting the need for urgent action to address the effects of climate change on vulnerable ecosystems.
A thick mist clung to the edge of the Alaskan wilderness, blurring the boundary between the expansive forest and the small town of Harvold. Life in Harvold was a delicate balance between man and nature, with the townspeople respecting the wilderness's power and knowing the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Here, predators roamed freely, and survival was a constant challenge. Lucas Griegson, a seasoned hunter whose family had lived in these lands long before Harvold existed, was deeply attuned to the land. Known for his prowess in hunting and trapping, Lucas could take down a moose with a single shot and track wolves through blizzards. Yet recently, Lucas sensed something was amiss. A few weeks ago, livestock began disappearing at the edge of town. Initially suspected to be wolves or a mountain lion, the signs soon revealed a far more brutal presence. Animals weren't just killed. They were mauled and torn apart, their remains scattered across the frozen ground. Lucas examined the grisly evidence up close. Deep claw marks, shattered bones, and the unmistakable signs of a grizzly bear, most likely a rogue one. While grizzlies were common in the area, they typically avoided human settlements, preferring the more profound wilderness. But this bear seemed different. It had ventured closer to town, possibly due to sickness or a new relentless hunger. The bear's increasing proximity was a growing concern for the city. Tensions mounted. The townspeople locked their doors at night, kept children close, and avoided the forests. Hunters were on high alert, and patrols around the town increased. Yet a pervasive unease lingered, knowing that something was watching from the vast wilderness. That tension reached a peak one bitterly cold evening. The wind howled, and darkness swallowed the last remnants of daylight. Harvold huddled in its small valley, its wooden cabins lit by flickering lights. The snow crunched underfoot as the Hansen family, living on the town's edge, went about their evening routine. Unbeknownst to them, they were being observed. In the cover of the forest, the rogue grizzly moved silently, its massive form gliding through the trees. Drawn by the scent of food and the barking of the family dog, it had been watching the Hansen property, preparing for its next move. The bear was no longer the majestic creature of the wild it once was. Hunger, rage, and perhaps madness had taken hold. Its once thick fur was matted and patchy, its eyes gleamed with a feverish intensity, and its movements had become erratic, unpredictable. It had grown bold, far too daring, and now it was only feet away from the town. In the fading light, the grizzly emerged from the forest, its hulking form barely visible against the backdrop of snow and trees. The Hansen's dog, a loyal and energetic Malamute, caught sight of the bear first. It barked wildly, hackles raised, warning its owners of the approaching danger. But the bear was not deterred by the noise. It charged, moving with horrifying speed for something so significant. The attack was swift and brutal. The bear barreled through the backyard, jaws snapping as it seized the dog in its powerful grip. The Malamute yelped in pain, its body flailing as the grizzly shook it violently. Blood sprayed across the snow, painting the once peaceful yard in a gruesome tableau. Inside the house, the Hansons heard the commotion. The bark turning into high-pitched cries, the thud of something heavy slamming into the ground. They rushed to the window, their hearts sinking as they saw the massive shape of the grizzly in their yard. The bear stood over the broken body of their dog, its muzzle covered in blood. For a moment, it seemed as though time stopped, the sheer shock of the sight freezing them in place. But the bear wasn't finished. It lifted its head, its nose twitching as it caught the scent of the humans inside the house. Without hesitation, it turned its attention toward the home, moving toward the sliding glass door at the back of this property. The fragile barrier between the family and the deadly predator seemed laughable in the face of such raw power. Lucas, who lived just a short distance away, had been outside when he heard the dog's frantic barking. He knew that sound. It was a sound of imminent danger. Without thinking, he grabbed his rifle and bolted in the direction of the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. He could already guess what was happening, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he reached the Hanson property. The towering and monstrous bear was only a few feet from the house, its breath visible in the cold air, mingling with the blood of the fallen dog. The Hansons were trapped inside, helpless as the beast approached. Lucas raised his rifle, taking aim at the bear's massive form. He had hunted bears before, but never like this. Never one that was so close to the town, so utterly unafraid. He fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the silent forest. The bullet struck the bear in the side, a clean hit, but it wasn't enough. The grizzly roared in fury, spinning toward Lucas with terrifying speed. In an instant, the predator had abandoned its assault on the house and charged toward him, its eyes burning with rage. Lucas barely had time to react. He fired another shot, but the bear was already upon him. Its massive paw swiped at him, claws tearing through his coat and flesh. The force of the blow sent him sprawling into the snow. His rifle was knocked from his hands. Pain shot through his body, but there was no time to dwell on it. The bear was on top of him, its weight crushing, its breath hot and stinky. The bear attacked Lucas with ferocious abandon, its claws and teeth tearing through his flesh. Lucas struggled against the beast, grappling with its thick fur, but its strength was overpowering. As they fought, they tumbled into a nearby creek, the cold water rushing over the rocks. Lucas tried to escape, his hands scrabbling for purchase, but the bear's grip was ironclad. It dragged him under the icy water, pushing him down with relentless force. The cold was a sharp shock, but the bear's weight pressing him beneath the surface was far worse. The water churned as the bear used its massive paws to keep Lucas submerged. His lungs burned as he fought for air, but the bear pressed him more profoundly, the icy water filling his mouth and nose. His vision blurred, and the world around him faded as the bear's monstrous form loomed above. Eventually, Lucas's struggles ceased, his strength drained by the cold and the bear's assault. Sensing victory, the bear released his lifeless body, which floated away with the current. As night fell, the bear vanished into the forest, leaving Harvold in fear. The town, now on high alert, began a desperate hunt for the rogue grizzly, living in constant dread of the beast's return.
It was July 15th, 2023, when John and his two children, Sarah and Ethan, set out for a family camping trip in Banff National Park, Canada. John, a single father in his early 40s, loved the outdoors and had always enjoyed sharing nature experiences with his children. Banff, known for its stunning landscapes and diverse wildlife, was a favorite destination for them. Sarah, age 12, and Ethan, age 9, were both excited about the adventure, eager to explore the park's trails and enjoy the beauty of the Canadian Rockies. The family arrived at their campsite in the early afternoon. They set up their tent and organized their gear, including a bear-proof food container for their supplies. John had always emphasized safety on their trips, teaching his children about the importance of respecting wildlife and being prepared. After setting up, they spent the day hiking and exploring the area, marveling at the beautiful scenery and spotting various animals from a safe distance. As evening approached, they returned to their campsite to cook dinner, John and the kids enjoyed a meal by the campfire, sharing stories and laughing. The tranquil surroundings and the crackling of the fire created a perfect ending to their day. After dinner, they cleaned up and prepared for bed, making sure to store all food items securely in the bear-proof container. John double-checked everything, ensuring the campsite was safe. However, in the excitement of the day, the latch on the bear-proof container was not fully secured. The scent of their leftover food wafted through the air, unnoticed by the family. As night fell and the temperatures dropped, the family settled into their tent, feeling cozy and content. The stars shone brightly in the clear night sky, adding to the peaceful atmosphere. In the dead of night, the calm was shattered by the sound of rustling and heavy breathing outside the tent. John awoke to see a dark silhouette moving near the tent. His heart raced as he realized a black bear had entered their campsite, attracted by the food. The bear, hungry and curious, had found the unlatched food container and was rummaging through it. Suddenly, the bear turned its attention to the tent, tearing through the fabric with its powerful claws. John acted quickly, grabbing the nearest object he could find, a frying pan. With the bear ripping through the tent, John knew he had to protect his children at all costs. He positioned himself between the bear and his kids, using the frying pan to strike the bear, trying to scare it away. The bear growled and swiped at John, inflicting painful injuries. Despite the pain and fear, John continued to fend off the bear, determined to protect Sarah and Ethan. The children, terrified, huddled together at the back of the tent, watching in shock as their father bravely fought the bear. The situation was dire, and John's actions were fueled by sheer desperation and love for his children. John continued to fend off the bear with the frying pan, each strike more desperate than the last. The bear, agitated and aggressive, clawed at him, causing deep wounds. Despite the pain, John did not back down. His priority was keeping Sarah and Ethan safe. The bear, startled by the unexpected resistance, began to retreat. The noise and commotion had disturbed the quiet night, alerting nearby campers to the danger. Just as the bear started to back away, John gave one final, forceful swing. The bear growled, and deciding the struggle wasn't worth it, turned and lumbered away into the darkness. John, exhausted and bleeding, collapsed inside the tent. The immediate threat had passed, but the family was still in shock and needed help. The nearby campers, hearing the commotion, rushed to the scene. They found the tent partially destroyed and John seriously injured but conscious. Sarah and Ethan, though scared, were unharmed thanks to their father's bravery. The campers quickly called for emergency assistance, and one of them began administering first aid to John. The park rangers arrived promptly, assessing the situation and ensuring the bear was no longer a threat. They transported John to the nearest medical facility in Bamptown for treatment. The injuries were severe, but the medical team acted quickly to stabilize him. The children were also checked for any injuries and comforted by the rangers and campers who had come to their aid. John's quick thinking and courageous actions saved his children from a potentially fatal encounter. News of the incident spread quickly, and John was praised for his bravery. The park authorities reviewed the situation, noting the importance of properly securing food and other scented items while camping to prevent such incidents. In the days that followed, John recovered in the hospital, surrounded by his grateful children. The incident left a lasting impression on the family, highlighting the unpredictable nature of wildlife encounters and the need for vigilance. The park authorities used the event as an educational opportunity, reinforcing safety guidelines and the proper use of bear-proof containers. The family received numerous messages of support from friends and strangers alike, all admiring John's bravery and quick response. The campers who had helped were also thanked for their prompt action in alerting authorities and providing first aid. The experience brought the family closer together, deepening their respect for nature and its powerful inhabitants. As John healed, he reflected on the incident and the lessons learned. The family knew they had been fortunate, and the experience became a story they would share, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the importance of staying prepared and acting quickly in the face of danger. The memory of that night would stay with them, a reminder of both the beauty and the unpredictability of the wilderness.
A group of climbers had meticulously planned their ascent for months, studying the Rocky Mountains' contours and plotting every route to one of its most challenging peaks. Led by Bram Morrow, an experienced mountaineer, the team included Kylan Thorne, a focused veteran, Merritt Hagen, a seasoned wilderness guide, Cassidy Lohr, a young but skilled alpine climber, and Soren, whose quiet demeanor masked his extensive mountain knowledge. Their journey began on a crisp morning as they set out toward the towering peak, carrying gear for a week-long expedition: food, tents, ropes, climbing equipment, and bear spray. They faced the Rocky Mountains' daunting yet exhilarating challenge. For days, their climb progressed smoothly, They navigated steep ridges, narrow passes, and icy trails, synchronizing their movements as they scaled rock faces and trudged through the snow. At night, they camped in sheltered spots, conserving warmth as temperatures plummeted. The distant wildlife sounds were their only company, and danger seemed distant. On the fifth day, they approached the most challenging section, a nearly vertical ascent along a narrow ridge. They reached a plateau near a river, intending to camp for the night. The rushing water offered a brief reprieve from their exertions. As dusk fell, Soren secured the tent ropes while Merritt and Bram scouted for a fire spot. Cassidy admired the river's beauty while filling a water canister, feeling an uneasy chill she attributed to exhaustion. Kylan, ever vigilant, noticed an eerie silence in the forest. Scanning the tree line, he saw a massive grizzly bear emerging from the brush, its dark fur matted and its size overwhelming. The bear, likely drawn by their scent or noise, approached their camp with deliberate steps. Kylan signaled frantically to the others, silently mouthing "bear" and pointing. The team froze, their training kicking in. Bram reached for the bear spray, signaling everyone to do the same. Despite their preparedness, the sight of the massive beast invoked a palpable tension, a stark reminder of the wild's unpredictable nature. They stood in a tight formation, hoping that their presence would deter the bear from coming any closer. But the grizzly was undeterred. Its nostrils flared as it sniffed the air again, detecting something it liked, perhaps the scent of food in their packs. It began moving toward them with increasing speed, its massive paws thudding against the ground. Bram and the others knew they had to stay calm, but adrenaline surged through them, heightening their senses. The bear was closing the distance rapidly, and it was clear that this was no bluff charge. The animal's ears were flat against its head, its gaze locked onto them. Without warning, the bear broke into a full sprint, covering the ground between them in seconds. Merritt, thinking quickly, deployed his bear spray, a plume of aerosol mist hissing into the air in the bear's direction. The grizzly hesitated, but only for a moment. It reared up on its hind legs, roaring in anger, its massive frame towering over them. The bear spray had only managed to enrage the beast further. In a moment of pure terror, Soren, who had been standing closest to the bear, made a panicked decision. He turned and ran, his legs propelling him toward the cliffs that bordered the river, his mind overwhelmed by the primal instinct to flee. The others shouted in their minds, knowing that running was the worst possible reaction, but there was nothing they could do to stop him. The bear, its predatory instincts fully engaged, immediately gave chase. Soren's footfalls were frantic as he sprinted toward the cliffside, his breath ragged in his chest. Behind him, the bear closed in, its powerful body moving with frightening speed. Every fiber of Soren's being was focused on escape, but the terrain was unforgiving, the cliffside offering little in the way of shelter. Within moments, the bear was upon him, swiping at him with a massive paw. The blow sent him sprawling, his body slamming into the ground with a sickening thud. He scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from where the bear's claws had raked his back, but the cliffside offered no refuge. Soren reached the edge of the precipice, his boots slipping on loose gravel as he peered down at the raging river 30 feet below. The water churned violently, a deadly current awaiting him. Behind, the bear growled menacingly, its presence a thunderous reminder of the danger he faced. Cornered with no escape, Soren turned to confront the bear, hoping to intimidate it or find a way around. But the grizzly was relentless. It lunged again, and Soren lost his footing, teetering on the cliff's edge. With one final mighty shove, the bear sent him hurtling into the river below. The icy water enveloped him instantly, dragging him under before he could react. The current tossed him violently, and his gear weighed him down, making it impossible to fight the mighty river. From the cliffside, the remaining climbers watched in horror as Soren vanished beneath the turbulent waters. The bear, seemingly satisfied, lingered briefly at the edge before retreating into the forest. The climbers were left stunned and paralyzed with fear, their sense of invincibility shattered by the brutal loss of their friend. The once majestic wilderness now seemed hostile and unforgiving. Bram, pale and troubled, motioned for the group to pack up. Their movements were mechanical, devoid of hope or purpose. No one dared to search the river. They knew the fast-moving water had likely carried Soren far away, beyond any hope of recovery. The climb to the summit was abandoned. A tense silence marked the descent, every sound amplified, every rustle or snap of a branch causing hearts to race. The mountain, once a symbol of their goal, now loomed overhead as a stark reminder of their loss. By the time they reached the base, they were physically and emotionally exhausted, their minds burdened by the tragedy that had unfolded. The memory of Soren's death would forever haunt them, a grim reminder of nature's unforgiving power.
On July 17, 2024, in the dense forests of Siberia, seasoned hunter Ivan Petrov set out on his annual bear hunting expedition. Ivan, a man in his early 50s, had spent most of his life in the vast wilderness of Siberia. He grew up in a small village near Lake Baikal, one of the most remote and pristine areas in the world. From a young age, Ivan had learned the ways of the forest from his father, who was also a hunter. Over the years, Ivan became known for his skills and deep knowledge of the local wildlife. Hunting was not just a hobby for Ivan, it was a way of life. He respected the animals he hunted and believed in using every part of the animal, from the meat to the fur. His experience and respect for nature made him a respected figure in his community. Each year, Ivan would embark on a hunting trip, carefully planning and preparing for weeks in advance. This year, his goal was to track and hunt a massive grizzly bear that had been spotted in the area. The forests of Siberia are known for their dense trees, rugged terrain, and unpredictable weather. On the morning of July 17th, Ivan set out early, equipped with his rifle, hunting knife, and essential gear. He followed the bear's tracks, which led him deep into the forest. The air was crisp, and the sounds of the forest surrounded him. Ivan moved with caution, his senses sharp, as he knew that grizzly bears were powerful and dangerous animals. As the day progressed, Ivan followed the tracks through thick underbrush and over rocky hills. The hunt required patience and skill, as the bear was elusive. Ivan had been tracking it for hours, and he felt he was getting closer. The bear's tracks were fresh, and Ivan could sense its presence nearby. His heart raced with anticipation as he moved silently through the forest, careful not to make any noise that could alert the bear. Suddenly, the weather changed. A heavy downpour began, the rain falling hard and fast, obscuring Ivan's vision. The forest became darker, and the ground turned muddy and slippery. The sudden change in weather made it difficult for Ivan to see the tracks clearly. He paused, wiping the rain from his face, trying to regain his bearings. The sound of the rain and the rustling leaves around him created a tense atmosphere. Unbeknownst to Ivan, the bear had sensed the danger and circled back. The grizzly, an intelligent and formidable animal, was now stalking the hunter. Ivan focused on the tracks and the rain, and did not realize the bear was approaching from behind. The thick forest and heavy rain masked the bear's movements, allowing it to get closer without being detected. The encounter that followed was sudden and terrifying. The bear, sensing the threat, ambushed Ivan. With a powerful swipe, the bear knocked Ivan to the ground, causing him to drop his rifle. The force of the attack left Ivan dazed and vulnerable. As he struggled to get up, the bear mauled him, its claws and teeth inflicting severe injuries. As Ivan Petrov lay on the ground, severely injured, his instincts for survival kicked in. Despite the intense pain, he reached for his hunting knife, which was strapped to his belt. The bear continued its attack, but Ivan knew he had to act quickly to save his life. With a surge of adrenaline, he managed to stab the bear in its side. The bear roared in pain, momentarily distracted by the injury. Taking advantage of this brief moment, Ivan struggled to his feet and stumbled backward. He knew that he couldn't outrun the bear in his current state, but he needed to create some distance. The bear, wounded and agitated, hesitated for a moment before turning back to face him. Ivan's heart pounded as he assessed his options. He was deep in the Siberian forest, far from help, and the rain continued to pour down, making the situation even more dangerous. Ivan knew he had to find a way to escape or at least deter the bear long enough to get to safety. He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on the bear, and tried to move toward a denser part of the forest. The thick trees and underbrush might offer some cover and slow the bear's movements. The bear, however, was not easily deterred. It continued to follow Ivan, growling and snarling. With each step, Ivan felt the pain from his injuries intensify. Blood flowed from deep wounds, and his vision blurred. He knew he needed medical attention soon, but he couldn't stop. The bear, sensing its prey was weakened, advanced again. Ivan used his remaining strength to swing his knife, slashing at the bear's face. The blow was enough to make the bear retreat slightly, giving Ivan a few precious seconds. In those critical moments, Ivan spotted a large tree with low branches. Using the last of his energy, he climbed up, pulling himself onto a sturdy branch. The bear, unable to climb, roared in frustration and circled the base of the tree. Ivan knew he was not safe yet, but at least he was out of immediate reach. He clung to the branch, breathing heavily, trying to stay conscious. As the rain continued to fall, Ivan's thoughts raced. He needed to stop the bleeding and get help, but the bear was still below, watching and waiting. Hours passed, and the bear eventually lost interest, retreating into the forest. Ivan waited, unsure if the bear would return before carefully climbing down from the tree. With great effort, Ivan made his way back to his camp. He used a first aid kit to bandage his wounds as best he could. He knew he had to get to a hospital quickly, but the nearest town was miles away. Ivan used his radio to call for help, hoping someone would hear him. The experience left Ivan deeply shaken, and he knew his perspective on hunting had changed forever. He had faced death and survived, and he would never see the animals he once hunted in the same way again.
A group of 5 set off early in the morning from the Denali National Park trailhead. The sky was painted in soft pinks and blues, gently illuminating the towering peaks of the Alaska Range. The trail, popular with experienced hikers, led them through the rugged wilderness up into the mountains. The late summer air was crisp but not biting, adding to their excitement for the adventure ahead. At the trailhead, they had noted a recent bear sighting on the notice board. As seasoned hikers, they were familiar with such warnings, but took them in stride. Denali was bear country, home to many grizzlies, and encounters, while rare, were part of the risk. The group, led by Eric, a tall and experienced hiker from the Midwest, with friends August, Colleen, and siblings Dakota and Elias, had packed bear spray and adhered to safety protocols, including making noise and staying together. The hike started smoothly. They traversed through spruce and birch forests before emerging into the alpine tundra, where the vast mountains seemed to engulf the sky. The untouched beauty of the Alaskan wilderness was awe-inspiring, a stark contrast to the modern world. As they gained elevation, they noticed fresh bear tracks in the soft earth, large, unmistakable prints that meandered off into the brush. Colleen, the most cautious, pointed them out. Though the tracks were recent and clearly from a grizzly, Eric reassured the group and they continued, feeling secure with the sun high and the group together. Hours later, the trail became steeper and rockier, the air thinner and the terrain jagged. The group slowed, stopping occasionally to catch their breath or admire the views. The initial tension from the bear tracks faded, replaced by the routine of hiking. Eric led. Dakota and Elias stayed in the middle, while Colleen, feeling fatigued, lingered behind. Unbeknownst to them, a massive, emaciated grizzly had been tracking them. Driven by hunger and desperation, it had picked up their scent earlier, drawn by the smell of food and human presence. The bear, whose ribs were visible through its ragged fur, had become more aggressive and bold in its search for an easy meal. As the afternoon light cast long shadows, the bear's patience snapped. It moved closer, its massive paws silent on the forest floor, eyes fixed on the lagging Colleen. Absorbed in her exhaustion, she hadn't noticed the subtle changes in her environment, the sudden silence of the birds or the shifting wind. The bear's approach was slow and deliberate. With each step, the threat grew closer, hidden by the thick brush. The group, immersed in their hike and their growing fatigue, remained oblivious to the predator stalking them from the shadows. Suddenly there was a crack, a sharp snap of a branch, and Colleen turned, her eyes wide. A moment of eerie silence hung in the air before the underbrush exploded with movement. The grizzly charged. Colleen barely had time to react. Her body froze for a split second, instinctual terror rooting her to the spot. Then she ran. The others were too far ahead to hear the initial crash of the bear's approach. By the time Colleen screamed, it was too late. The bear, propelled by hunger and primal aggression, was upon her in an instant. It barreled through the brush, its enormous form a blur of fur and muscle, knocking her to the ground with a force that drove the air from her lungs. The impact was brutal. Colleen felt the weight of the beast press down on her, its claws tearing into her pack and ripping through the fabric like paper. She struggled, kicking and thrashing, her hands fumbling for the bear spray at her side. But the grizzly's ferocity overwhelmed her. The scent of wet earth and the musky odor of the bear filled her nostrils, mixing with the coppery tang of blood. The others, alerted by the noise, turned to see the horror unfolding behind them. Eric shouted something incomprehensible, his voice carried away by the wind as he and the others scrambled back down the trail. But the bear's focus was singular. It had chosen its prey. In the chaos, Colleen managed to wriggle free for a moment, rolling to her feet and staggering toward the riverbank, her breath ragged and panicked. The river, swollen from recent rains, roared nearby, its waters fast and unforgiving. But there was no time to think. The bear was on her again, its jaws clamping down on her shoulder with a sickening crunch. The pain was blinding. Colleen screamed as the bear dragged her toward the water, its claws digging into her flesh. She kicked and fought, but the grizzly was relentless, its hunger driving it into a frenzy. With a final violent shove, the bear and Colleen tumbled into the river. The icy water engulfed them both, the current immediately pulling them downstream. Colleen thrashed in the water, trying desperately to stay afloat, but the bear, still latched onto her, dragged her down. The river churned violently, sweeping them along the jagged rocks and over submerged logs. Colleen's body slammed into the debris, her vision going in and out of focus as the cold and shock took hold. The others reached the riverbank just in time to see the horrifying scene. Eric, August, Dakota, and Elias stood helplessly, watching as the bear and Colleen were carried downstream. They shouted and screamed her name, but there was nothing they could do. The river was too fast and too dangerous. They could only watch as the bear, still gripping Colleen in its jaws, disappeared around a bend, the water swallowing them both. For what felt like an eternity, the group stood frozen, paralyzed by the horror they had just witnessed. Their minds struggled to process the brutality and speed at which everything had happened. Eric was the first to break from the trance, pulling out his phone and shaking hands to call for help, though deep down, they all knew it was too late. Park officials arrived hours later, long after the river had calmed and the sun had begun to dip below the horizon. Search teams scoured the area, but as night fell, the chances of finding Colleen or even recovering her body grew slim. The river was notorious for its hidden dangers, and the bear, driven by hunger and instinct, would not have left much behind. The following day, Denali National Park officials launched a review. The incident, though rare, was a stark reminder of the wilderness's unpredictable dangers. Warnings about bear sightings were updated, and discussions began about implementing stricter trail safety protocols. Bear activity in the area was increasing, and hikers were urged to take even greater precautions. But for the group, those changes came too late. Colleen was gone, her life claimed by the unforgiving wilderness of Denali. The park, which was as beautiful and awe-inspiring as it was, had shown its darker side. A reminder that in this vast, untamed land, nature ruled supreme, and even the most experienced hikers were not immune to its dangers.
On July 20th, 2022, Emily, an adventurous solo hiker, set out on a summer trek through the pristine wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska. Emily was an experienced hiker in her early 30s, known for her love of the outdoors and exploring remote places. She had hiked in various challenging terrains before, from the mountains of Colorado to the deserts of Arizona. This trip to Kodiak Island was something she had been planning for months. Emily meticulously prepared for her journey, researching the best trails and studying the island's unique ecosystem. She was aware of the wildlife, especially the famous Kodiak bears, known for their size and strength. Emily packed all the necessary gear, including a tent, food supplies, a first aid kit, and most importantly, bear spray. She was determined to explore the untouched beauty of the island, with its dense forests, rugged mountains, and clear streams. Kodiak Island, located in the Gulf of Alaska, is renowned for its stunning landscapes and rich wildlife. The island's remote and wild nature made it a perfect destination for Emily's adventure. She arrived on the island with high spirits, eager to begin her trek. The weather was warm and sunny, ideal for hiking. As Emily ventured deeper into the wilderness, she marveled at the natural beauty surrounding her. The lush green forests, the sound of birds, and the sight of eagles soaring overhead filled her with joy. She followed a well-trodden path, enjoying the tranquility and solitude of the journey. The trail led her through valleys and up hills, offering breathtaking views of the island's landscape. By midday, Emily had covered a significant distance and decided to take a break. She found a peaceful spot by a stream and set up a small camp to rest and have lunch. As she sat by the water, she spotted a small bear cub nearby, playing among the trees. The sight was charming, and Emily watched in fascination, unaware of the potential danger. Suddenly, the peaceful scene turned into a nightmare. The cub's mother, a massive Kodiak bear, appeared, sensing a threat to her young. The bear, standing over 10 feet tall on its hind legs, roared and charged toward Emily. The speed and ferocity of the attack left Emily with no time to reach for her bear spray. In a desperate bid for safety, she scrambled up a nearby tree, The bear reached the base of the tree in seconds, slashing at Emily with powerful claws. One swipe left a deep wound on her leg, causing intense pain. Emily, despite the injury, climbed higher, clutching onto the branches as the bear continued its assault from below. The bear roared and pawed at the tree, but Emily managed to stay out of its reach. As the sun began to set, the bear eventually lost interest and moved away, leaving Emily clinging to the tree, injured and shaken. The forest grew dark, and the temperature dropped, but Emily knew she had to stay in the tree for the night. The ordeal was a harsh reminder of the unpredictable nature of the wild and the dangers that come with it. As darkness fell over the dense wilderness of Kodiak Island, Emily remained perched high in the tree, clutching the branches tightly. The pain from her wound throbbed, and she felt the cold air seeping in, chilling her to the bone. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stay warm and keep her mind focused. The forest around her was silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves and distant sounds of wildlife. Emily knew she had to stay alert, fearing the bear might return. The experience had been terrifying, and the reality of her situation was sinking in. She was alone, injured, and far from help. The isolation and the cold night air made the hours drag on. Emily's thoughts drifted to her family and friends, hoping they would not worry too much about her. She had always been cautious on her hikes, but this encounter had been unexpected and dangerous. As the night wore on, Emily did her best to stay awake, but exhaustion eventually overtook her. She dozed off briefly, only to wake with a start at the sound of rustling below. Her heart raced, but she realized it was just a small animal passing by. The relief was short-lived as the reality of spending the night in the tree set in again. She tried to stay calm, knowing that panic would only make things worse. When the first light of dawn appeared, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. The night had been long and cold, but she had made it through. She carefully climbed down from the tree, her legs shaking from the cold and the effort. The wound on her leg was painful, but she needed to find help. Emily knew she had to get to a safer location where she could tend to her injury and signal for assistance. As she made her way back towards the trail, Emily heard a distant noise. It was the sound of an engine. She hurried towards the source of the noise, limping slightly from her wound. To her immense relief, she saw a park ranger's vehicle approaching. The ranger had been patrolling the area and noticed the signs of a recent bear presence, leading him to investigate further. The ranger quickly assessed Emily's condition and provided first aid, bandaging her wound and giving her water. Emily was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. The ranger radioed for help, and soon Emily was transported to the nearest medical facility for treatment. The ordeal had been a harrowing experience, a stark reminder of the power and unpredictability of nature. Emily's encounter with the bear left her with a deep respect for the wild and the creatures that inhabit it. The experience had been a test of her endurance and survival skills, one she would never forget. As she recovered, Emily reflected on the importance of being prepared and respectful of the natural world. Her story became a cautionary tale for others, highlighting the need for caution and awareness when venturing into the wilderness.
The wilderness of Kamchatka, a remote expanse in Russia's Far East, was a place where nature's raw power reigned supreme. This rugged land, with its active volcanoes, towering mountains, and dense forests, was home to the formidable Kamchatka grizzly bear, known for its enormous size and unpredictable nature. Sergei Alexeyevich, a seasoned hunter, thrived in this harsh environment. Known for his quiet resolve and systematic approach, he was a solitary figure deeply connected to the land he navigated. Today, Sergei embarked on his routine bear hunt, armed with his rifle and heavy pack. The hunt was not just a practice, but a pursuit of mastery over the wilderness. Navigating the dense forest, Sergei, familiar with every sign and sound, moved purposefully. Hours passed in silence, disturbed only by the occasional bird call or rustling wind. As he approached the riverbank, the air grew colder, carrying the damp scent of the river and the subtle hint of a predator's presence. Crouching low, Sergei found fresh bear tracks, massive impressions in the soft earth. His senses heightened, and his movements became more deliberate, signaling that the hunt was about to intensify. He continued forward, following the tracks with the precision of someone who had done this countless times before. The river, swollen from recent rains, rushed noisily through the landscape, its currents swift and cold. Sergei moved parallel to it, eyes darting from the tracks to the dense foliage ahead. It was here, near the water's edge, that he unknowingly made a critical mistake. The terrain was unfamiliar, and as he maneuvered through a narrow passage between two large boulders, he found himself in a small, secluded clearing. The scent of the river masked the presence of the bear. Sergei didn't see it at first, the massive creature camouflaged by the thick brush. It was when he stepped into the clearing that everything happened at once. The grizzly, enormous male, easily weighing over 800 pounds, had been resting by the riverbank, its thick fur soaked from a recent foray into the water. Startled by Sergei's sudden appearance, the bear rose to its full height on its hind legs, towering over the hunter. There was no time for Sergei to react. In an instant, the bear's primal instinct took over, and it charged with a speed and ferocity that belied its size. Sergei, frozen in that brief moment of recognition, barely had time to raise his rifle before the bear was upon him. The impact was devastating. The bear's massive paw swiped across Sergei's chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. His rifle was knocked from his hands, clattering uselessly to the side. The initial strike had broken several ribs, and Sergei's body screamed in agony as he tried to push himself up. Blood dripped from deep gashes across his torso, and the sharp pain in his side made it difficult to breathe. But there was no time to process the injury, no time to think. The bear, driven by a mix of fear and rage, did not relent. It came down on Sergei with its total weight, its powerful jaws snapping inches from his face. Instinct took over. Sergei reached for his knife, the only weapon he had left. His fingers, slick with blood, fumbled at his belt, but he managed to free the blade just as the bear lunged again. With all the strength he could muster, Sergei slashed at the beast's side, the knife sinking into the thick fur and muscle. The bear roared in pain, rearing back momentarily, but the wound was superficial. It only seemed to fuel the creature's aggression. Before Sergei could make another move, the bear swiped again, this time striking his leg. The force of the blow sent a sharp pain shooting through his body, and he felt the bone crack. The bear's jaws clamped down on his shoulder, the teeth puncturing deep into muscle and flesh. Sergei's vision blurred, the searing pain overwhelming his senses, but he fought against the rising tide of unconsciousness. He had to survive. He had to keep fighting. The river, once a distant murmur, was now dangerously close. In their struggle, Sergei and the bear had moved to the water's edge. Icy spray hit Sergei's legs as the bear dragged him toward the shallows. Despite his efforts to resist by clutching at mud and rocks, the bear's immense strength and the powerful current overwhelmed him. The freezing water surged around them, intensifying the bear's attack. Sergei's strength waned as the cold drained his energy, turning each breath into a struggle. The bear's relentless assault pulled him deeper into the river, and Sergei's limbs grew numb, his vision blurring. The roar of the river and the bear's growls merged into a chaotic symphony as his world darkened. In his final moments, Sergei's thoughts lingered not on fear but on the wilds that had shaped his life. When authorities arrived, alerted by Sergei's absence, they found a grim scene. The riverbank was stained with blood, and the disturbed earth and broken branches marked the violent struggle. Sergei's body was partially submerged downstream, the cold waters having carried him away. His rifle lay untouched several feet away from the attack site. The tracks revealed the bear's path. It had retreated into the forest, wounded but alive. The authorities, well versed in Kamchatka's dangers, issued warnings to the community. Sergei's tragic end served as a stark reminder of the wilderness's unpredictability. The village, once secure in its knowledge of the land, now faced an uneasy reality. Even the most experienced hunters could fall victim to its untamed power. The Alaskan wilderness had always been a cherished retreat for Terrence Byrne and Finnegan Whitaker. Friends since childhood, they had spent decades embarking on fishing trips to the world's most secluded spots. This year, they ventured to the Chillicothe River deep in Alaska's backcountry, seeking the peace and solitude of its pristine banks. Upon arrival, the morning air was crisp, with a heavy mist cloaking the river. The men set up camp by a tranquil bend, a location they had carefully chosen weeks in advance. Terrence, stocky and broad-shouldered, marveled at the untouched landscape, while Finnegan, leaner and wiry, prepared their gear. Both in their late 40s, they showed signs of aging, but still retained the stamina for their outdoor adventures. The hours passed quietly, marked only by the gentle lapping of water and the occasional cast of a fishing line. The river teemed with trout, their silvery bodies darting beneath the surface. The friends were absorbed in their routine of casting and reeling, relishing their annual escape from everyday life. As noon approached, the fog lifted, revealing the towering pines and rugged peaks in the distance. The wilderness felt timeless, its vastness making them feel both small and alive. However, the wild is notoriously unpredictable. Terrence, engrossed in fishing, barely noticed the faint rustling in the underbrush. Finnegan, however, spotted movement in the dense forest, a massive grizzly bear foraging for berries. The bear, though large and imposing, was a reasonable distance away and seemed disinterested in the men. Grizzly bears were common in the area, and the men were familiar with wilderness safety. They had taken all necessary precautions, storing food properly and keeping noise to a minimum. Finnegan's heart raced, but he remained calm. The bear, while a powerful symbol of the wild, appeared focused on its search for berries. The grizzly occasionally sniffed the air, but seemed more intrigued by the berries than by the fishermen. Finnegan glanced at Terrence, who nodded in silent agreement. They continued fishing, avoiding sudden movements or noise, allowing the bear to go about its business. The afternoon wore on, and the bear gradually disappeared into the thicker foliage, leaving the men to enjoy their solitude once more. But there was an underlying tension now, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The wilderness felt less predictable, more ominous, as though the vast forest was watching them. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the water, Terrence and Finnegan began to pack up their gear. They moved methodically, still cautious from the earlier encounter. The light was fading, and they knew better than to linger too long in bear country at dusk. The river's banks, once bathed in sunlight, were now cloaked in an eerie stillness. The sounds of birds had ceased, and the air had grown colder. Then from the forest's edge, the grizzly reappeared. It was closer this time, its dark eyes fixed on the two men. Finnegan's heart sank. Something was different. The bear was no longer foraging. It was watching them. Its massive body swayed as it moved toward the river, slow but deliberate. Every instinct in Finnegan's body screamed for him to stay calm, but a rising sense of dread began to take hold. Terrence, ever the pragmatic one, motioned for them to keep packing, his movements deliberate but strained. They had to leave, and quickly. The bear, now at the river's edge, stopped and sniffed the air again, its nostrils flaring. Time seemed to stretch in those few moments, every second of a lifetime, as the men continued packing, trying not to provoke the animal. But the bear's disinterest was gone. Without warning, it lowered its head and began to move toward them, first slowly, then picking up speed. Its massive paws pounded the earth, each thud sending tremors through the ground. It was charging. Terrence barely had time to react. One moment he was securing his fishing rod. The next, a grizzly bear struck him like a freight train. The impact knocked him off his feet, sending him crashing into the river. The icy water exploded around him as the bear dragged him further into the depths, its immense strength overpowering Terrence's desperate struggles. Frozen in shock, Finnegan could only watch as the bear, driven by primal rage, clamped its jaws onto Terrence's shoulder and pulled him deeper into the river. The water churned red with Terrence's blood, each violent thrash of the bear's claws ripping into him. Panic surged through Finnegan. He wanted to help, but knew any attempt would end in his death. The bear's savage assault left no room for hope. Terrence's attempts to free himself only seemed to escalate the bear's aggression, the creature's roars echoing through the valley as it tore into him. Finnegan's breath quickened, adrenaline fueling his decision to flee. There was no saving Terrence now. He turned and sprinted toward the forest, his boots splashing through the water. The sounds of the river and the bear's growls faded as he plunged into the dense woods. Branches lashed at him, and the uneven terrain threatened to trip him, but he pushed forward, driven by a singular focus: to get help. Hours later, exhausted and disoriented, Finnegan stumbled upon a ranger station. He collapsed at the door, breathless and incoherent, as he relayed the horrifying details of the attack. Authorities responded quickly, but they knew the grim reality of grisly encounters. A search team was dispatched to the river, but the chances of finding Terrence alive were slim. The river, once turbulent, was now eerily calm. Bloodstains and torn clothing marked the scene, but the bear and Terrence were gone. The wilderness had swallowed the tragedy, leaving behind only its harsh scars. The authorities issued warnings about the dangers of fishing in a bear country. The attack, though rare, was a stark reminder of the wilderness's unpredictability. Terrence's body was never recovered, lost to the river and the wilds. Finnegan, haunted by the events, never returned to Alaska. The fishing trips that once defined his friendship with Terence now lingered as painful memories overshadowed by the tragic loss.